Hello, friends, and welcome back to Mysterious Mondays. Tattooed Biker here with you, and tonight I have three chilling true stories detailing real encounters with dogman like cryptids. On a narrator's note, the second story is related by a close friend of the witness, and although I usually only present first person accounts from the experiencer, after reading this one I found it very credible, and so decided to include it. Anyways, we're wasting moonlight, so grab your gear and let's ride to Dogman country. Number 1. Dear TB, I'm located in southwest Pennsylvania, and my story unfolds in Washington County, where I've lived most of my life. There's been a variety of mysterious creatures and other strange animal encounters reported in the area for a long time. New home construction seems to be causing these creatures to seek refuge in the surrounding woods. One creature seen in the area is a large wolf-like animal. While little is known about the elusive creature, reports suggest that it possesses traits similar to both wolves and other large animals, like bears and mountain lions. But some people also claim that it has human-like qualities and features, which is what I feel is the most disturbing part of its existence. Like I said, I've lived almost my whole life in this area, but when I had my encounter, everything changed. I work as a freelance writer and researcher. It was on early morning, January 1st, 2012, and I had just gotten out of bed after staying out longer than I'd wanted at a New Year's Eve party. I was mad at myself for sleeping in and getting ready for my day when I heard this loud noise coming from outside. When I looked out the window, I was shocked to see a large wolf-like creature standing in the middle of my backyard. The creature didn't match anything I'd ever seen before. However, it looked like the creature I'd heard stories about all my life. It was easily twice the size of a normal wolf, but had human-like features, such as its eyes and feet. The mouth was slightly gaping, showing their sharp teeth. The menacing beast was just standing there, staring back at me as I watched it through the window. I didn't know how it knew I was there, and I couldn't figure out what to do about it being in my backyard. I just stared back at it, trying to figure out what this thing was. The truth is that I was a bit excited to see it. Here it was, the culmination of all my childhood fantasies and dreams about strange creatures. It was almost a surreal moment for me. But after standing there for quite some time, the creature finally turned and ran off into the woods. Without a second thought, I grabbed my coat and rushed outside to try and follow it. But by the time I got there, it had disappeared into the trees. I stood in the same spot it had stood, but couldn't see anything out of the ordinary. I looked around, but there were no footprints, so it seemed necessary to walk over to where it had entered the woods. As I approached the edge of the woods, I was shocked by a sudden loud howling. I was now scared and felt like maybe I'd pushed things too far. I started to slowly work my way toward my home, hoping the creature would just leave me alone. But as soon as I left the woods, it let out a loud growl and then lunged out of the thick cover. I turned 180 degrees from the creature and ran for my life. I reached my house and closed the back door quickly behind me. But the creature was right there, as it smashed into the door, shattering the glass and sending splinters of wood flying through the air. But it didn't get through the door. It stood steady and stayed in place. I was now in the kitchen and grabbed a knife in case it found its way into my house. But by the time I turned to look, it was gone. It was as if it had simply vanished into thin air. I was left standing and wondering what to do next. I called the police and reported the encounter. Over the next few hours, there was a search for the creature, but it was never found. At least, that's what the authorities told me. They told me there was nothing to worry about, and the next day a crew of some sort showed up with cameras and what looked like some kind of specialized detectors. However, I have no idea what this equipment was or what they were doing. For me, the creature will always remain a mystery, a sign of something more out there in the world. It's as if I got a glimpse of what could be lurking in the shadows, waiting for their next chance to strike. That reminder is enough to keep me on my toes for the rest of my life. Terrifying as it was, I'm actually grateful for that encounter because it validated a lot of my life's interests. Thanks for reading. Signed, Jake. Number 2. Dear Tattooed Biker, this story was shared to me probably a little over a year ago by a friend of mine, a U.S. Border Control agent, who obviously wanted to remain anonymous. Some of the stories he shared with me about working on the southern border were interesting, including some Bigfoot-type encounters, but the first incident that he experienced was a Dogman. This occurred when he was still training for his job. It really shook him because he had never seen anything like it before, and knowing him like I do, I trust him completely that this really happened to him. So he was driving around with a senior coworker, a field training officer. They were in their Ford truck driving around, showing him the checkpoints and hotspots where they usually find people trying to illegally cross the border. I believe he said he was working 10 or 12-hour shifts. This was at the Arizona-California border, where it intersects with the Mexico border. One night, while he was still fairly new, he actually had a cold and wasn't feeling very well. They were traveling on a dirt road, which was part of their normal routine. They didn't see any signs of people, which they thought was a little odd because he says they always see trash, water bottles, or clothes, or something out there. They got to their turnaround and flipped on their spotlights. They didn't really see anything, and as they're turning around, the headlights and the spotlights illuminated something in the distance. His training officer looked over and said, "Oh, that's probably just a wild animal. We should go take a look." They get closer, and I guess at this point, the terrain got kind of rough, and he slowly drove forward. While observing this animal, they could tell that it had dark black fur, but weren't sure just what they were looking at. Maybe we should just leave it alone. He was really urging the training officer that they should get out of there. His response was, "No, we need to go check it out." Then it clicked with the training officer that something about the situation wasn't right. It looked like a bear hunched over while eating something. They got within 30 yards of it, a good distance but still close enough that they could see what was going on. At this point, they flipped on another set of bright lights from the light bar on the cab roof. This creature lit up, and then it stood up. He thought it was a giant man with a fur coat, but as it turned around, he noticed that it had a dog's head, like a wolf's head, in fact. It was all black, and you could see the eyes. The eye shine was reflecting an amber tint. It was very muscular and had broad shoulders. It was way too huge to be a dog or wolf. Then it stood up on its back legs. He immediately stopped the truck as they watched this upright canine looking back at them. After several seconds, the dogman eventually took a step towards them, and then it took another step, and it started closing the distance. It wasn't walking fast, but its strides were so huge, and it was getting closer and closer. He threw the truck in reverse, and the dogman opened its mouth just a little bit and hunched over like it was sizing up prey. He quickly turned the truck around and drove away from the creature. He looked in the rearview mirror, and he could still see it, illuminated by the red taillights. He said that he had never seen anything like it in his life, and it scared the crap out of him. They drove directly back to the station. His training officer said it was just a big dog, but don't talk about it with anyone. They didn't mention it in their nightly report. He also said that occasionally you'll pick up migrants who'll talk about Lobos, or the big hairy man, and other strange stuff out in the desert. I just thought your listeners would enjoy this. Thanks. Signed, Anonymous. Number 3. Dear TB, about 3 nights ago, I saw something that I still can't fully understand or explain. I live in mid-Michigan, in a small residential or suburban town surrounded by cornfields. However, I do live in a more populated area, as my parents' house, where I currently reside, is located within walking distance of our downtown. Our street is by no means desolate, dark, or isolated, and most of the houses are fairly close to one another. A pretty urban setting given the town itself. It was about 2:30 a.m., and since it's pretty normal for me to be up that late, me and my dog have developed what I call our little routine. He comes to my door, lets out a huff to inform me that he's there, and then we go downstairs, where I let him out through the front door to do his business. After completing, he comes in and we share a midnight snack of ham, straight from the fridge. Now keep in mind, my dog is extremely well trained and very old. He doesn't need a leash or a fence to keep him from running away. He always comes right back after he's done. He'll even wait at the door if you aren't there. So, on this particular night, I open the door for him, and I'm just about to turn and walk away so I can prepare a midnight snack, and that's when I notice that he's still standing on the porch, staring across the street. This isn't completely out of the norm for him, but this was lasting a bit longer than usual. When he finally jumps off the porch, I follow his line of sight where he had been staring, and I see what looks like a large dog, or maybe even a wolf, slinking across my neighbor's yard on the other side of the street. For the first few seconds, I'm still trying to figure out what this thing is, because it looks like it might be a dog, but something about it just isn't right. It's too long, and the way it's moving isn't normal. And even though it was only about 50 feet away, it looked as though it was blurry. I can't think of any other way to describe it. Just none of it made any sense. At this point, I go into panic mode, because so far this creature hasn't seemed to notice me or my dog. But if it does, my dog doesn't stand a chance. Like I said, he's old, and also a Pomeranian. Whatever this thing was, it would destroy him, no doubt. I decide to slowly open the outer glass door, hoping to create just enough noise to alert my dog that it's time to come in, but not enough for whatever that thing is to hear me too. Luckily, my dog notices right away and starts running back towards me. But at the same time, this dog creature starts turning towards me as well, slowly. It almost felt fake, how unnatural it moved, like animatronics or something. I'm not even sure what I'm looking at, but I have this indescribable feeling I'm not supposed to be seeing this. So as this thing is turning to look at me, my dog is coming through the door simultaneously, and for about 1 second, I take my eyes off the creature thing to look down at my dog and close the door. When I look back up, this thing has moved about 30 feet to the left of my neighbor's driveway, rather than their yard, and it's standing on its hind legs, at almost 7 to 8 feet tall, staring directly at me. Now I'm really freaking out. How did it move so quickly, and how did it not make a single sound? And how was it so tall? I literally looked away for maybe half a second. I look away again to lock the door and gather myself, only to look back and see absolutely nothing. It was gone. This whole ordeal only lasted maybe 20 or 30 seconds total. Shaking, I give my dog his ham and mine, and I run downstairs to my brother's room in the basement to tell him what happened. Being a normal 19-year-old playing video games, his response was, "Wow, that's super weird." But honestly, I just needed to tell someone to confirm that what happened really happened, and that I couldn't wake up the next day and convince myself it was a dream. Over the last few days, I've told everyone who'd listen about what I saw, including my parents. Those who are closer to me seemed a bit more unnerved because, like I mentioned earlier, I don't usually believe in this type of thing. They could tell I was seriously shaken by whatever it was that I saw. Tonight, after some random Googling, as a result of my restless mind, I came across what appears to be the exact description of what I saw. The Dogman. I've never heard anything about it before, but I'm now fully convinced I saw one with my very eyes, and it saw me too. Signed, Lynette. Now for one bonus story, which is basically a story that I discovered in my email after production on this video had already began. It states as such: Dear Biker, this happened in 2015. It was a humid summer night around 11:30 p.m. near the Wise River in Montana. I lived alone in this remote location and we don't have cable, so the only option is satellite TV. It was a humid summer night in July and the TV was acting up, so I needed to go out and readjust the satellite like usual. I took a flashlight and a gun with me. When I went outside, it was unusually quiet. Like, so silent, it was unnerving. I brushed the thought off and went to the dish, which is in the corner of my yard. I went to work, making sure all the wires were all right, and pointing it to a different angle. Suddenly, I heard a small snap of a stick back to my left and turned the flashlight to the direction, and I saw a creature just standing there. I got a good look at it for what seemed like an eternity, but was in reality probably around 10 seconds. I slowly backed off and ran back to the house and locked all the doors and windows. The creature wasn't like anything I've ever seen before. When I shined the light at it, the first thing I saw was the head. It has cropped ears that pointed upwards. Its snout was narrower than a bear's and longer, and I could make out large teeth protruding from its jaw. Its eyes were a deep red shade that seemed to reflect off the light I was pointing at it. The body was muscular and huge. It had long arms that appeared to be longer than its legs, broad shoulders that tapered into a skinnier waist, and it was slightly crouched over when I saw it, with one hand wrapped around a small tree. I could make out the legs, which looked similar to a dog's legs. It had obvious hocks. Even with the crouched position, it had to have been at least my height, so standing up to full height would make it probably at least 7.5 feet tall. The fur was black and thicker around the neck and chest, and the bottom half significantly less so. I don't know if it was aggressive or not. What I do know is that I had a feeling of dread unlike anything I've ever experienced. Was it just observing me or stalking me? For a creature this large, it was deceivingly silent. It had gotten within 15 yards of me without me even noticing. All I knew was I needed to get out of there and not find out. I don't live on the property anymore, but after the event, I never had another face-to-face encounter, but I would occasionally hear sounds in the woods that I couldn't explain. They would start off relatively quiet and work their way up to furious howls and screams, and then back down to quiet again. I don't know if this was the same thing because it could be local wildlife. The location this encounter took place is 61720 Montana Highway, 43 Wise River, Montana, 59762, in case you want to search up the location on Google Maps. Thanks for reading this. Signed, Matthew. And there it is. 4 chilling true Dogman encounter stories from viewers. What'd you think about these? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments down below. And as always, If you've had a brush with the unexplained and would like to share your story, just send it to the email in the description, and your story just might make it into a future video. Thanks for watching, and until next time, stay curious, stay vigilant, stay safe, and I'll be seeing you on down the road a ways. Biker out.